Dark Myth WuKong, Chapter 42. The Boundless Water Vortex. In truth, Sun WuKong had been wary of the flowing light Myriad world's Buddha, but he had still underestimated him. The bright self-existent Buddha had certainly underestimated Sun WuKong's Golden Cudgel, but hadn't Sun WuKong, in turn, looked down on the Buddha's light beams. Because the Golden Cudgel had previously pierced nearly 1,000 orbs of light, Sun WuKong had mistakenly assumed they were merely somewhat tougher defensive barriers. Therefore, when he saw the flowing light Myriad world's Buddha split off 2 light orbs at the final moment, he hadn't paid much mind. But when his fist struck them, Sun WuKong knew something was wrong. He had been too careless. Before he could think further, Sun WuKong was sucked into the light orb. Only after entering did Sun WuKong discover that these light orbs were not as simple as he had imagined. Each was an entire great world. Although Sun WuKong didn't sense any life force within this world, apart from the absence of life, it was no different from the world he usually inhabited. The only difference, if any, was that the entire world was made of water. Not only was it raining, but everywhere his gaze fell, without exception, was water. Water that burned like fire. Water that flashed with purple lightning. Heavy water as black as ink, lethal green poisonous water. And even a clear, transparent illusory water. He truly didn't know how the flowing light Myriad world's Buddha had managed to create so many strange types of water. Upon appearing, Sun WuKong immediately began to fall. Although he tried his best to fly upwards, the raindrops in the sky were too dense, and each drop weighed over 10,000 catties. While they didn't injure him upon impact, they made it impossible for Sun WuKong to ride the clouds and ascend. Driven into a corner, Sun WuKong had no choice but to curl into a ball to reduce the surface area hit by the raindrops. A moment later, with a splash, Sun WuKong plunged into a vast ocean, flickering with lightning. As soon as he fell in, the seawater seemed to be agitated by something. All the dense lightning in the water converged on Sun WuKong, and from afar, more lightning was still gathering. In an instant, Sun WuKong's armor and clothes turned to ash and vanished. Though Sun WuKong wasn't injured, his qi and blood surged violently. The immense inertia from the fall, coupled with the instantaneous lightning strike, made Sun WuKong's head spin. But he knew that if he couldn't immediately regain his composure, even more terrifying lightning would likely follow. At that point, he would be in even greater danger. Therefore, Sun WuKong suddenly bit his tongue hard. A sharp pain shot through him, and he managed to regain his senses. Then, looking around, his expression turned grave. He was already a poor swimmer, and even worse at fighting in water, let alone in water now filled with purple-black lightning. This made it even more difficult for Sun WuKong to move. He tried to swim, but the situation made his heart sink. Although his limbs could move, his body was still sinking continuously. If this continued, the immense pressure at the bottom of the sea alone would be enough to severely injure him. The situation was becoming increasingly critical. At this moment, a flash of inspiration struck Sun WuKong. He tapped his hands around his body, and a golden light gradually emerged, growing intensely bright in an instant. Suddenly, Sun WuKong curled into a ball, and then the golden light began to slowly expand. Within a few breaths, it had expanded into a light orb about 3 zhang wide. Then, the light orb flashed, and the seawater returned to its original purplish-blue color. However, there was now a giant golden egg in the water. The entire egg was flawless, smooth as a mirror. Inside the giant egg, a thick earthen wall had appeared. This earthen wall was also egg-shaped, merely encased by the golden outer shell. Inside the earthen wall sat Sun WuKong in a meditative posture. It turned out that in his moment of crisis, Sun WuKong had suddenly thought of the earth and metal elements within his body. He then circulated the small amount of metal attribute spiritual power in his body outwards, pushing away the seawater and forming a sealed, airtight space. Then, to prevent the metal from conducting electricity, he used the earth element to create 6 earthen walls, forming a cube. He himself sat cross-legged inside this earthen cube. For now, he was temporarily safe. Seizing this opportunity, Sun WuKong focused his divine sense inward, concentrating it entirely within his sea of consciousness. Then nearly a third of his divine sense was poured into the illusory image of the Golden Cudgel within his sea of consciousness. Instantly, the Golden Cudgel, which had felt extremely weak, suddenly formed an incredibly strong connection. At this time, outside, the flowing light, Myriad world's Buddha had just entered the boundless water realm. He hadn't initially planned to enter, but then he suddenly couldn't sense Sun WuKong's presence within it. Although he was very confident in his water realm, it was impossible to kill a mid-level saint in such a short time. Therefore, out of caution, the flowing light Myriad world's Buddha decided to enter and see for himself. If Sun WuKong was truly dead, that would naturally be excellent. But if he wasn't, the Buddha didn't mind personally directing the boundless water realm to arrange for his demise today. Consequently, the flowing light Myriad world's Buddha, upon entering the boundless water realm, did not see the Golden Cudgel outside suddenly flare with brilliant golden light. The light orbs trapping the Golden Cudgel seemed to crack one by one, emitting myriad rays of light. However, after flaring brightly, the Golden Cudgel did not immediately break free. Instead, it grew quiet again. As the flowing light Myriad world's Buddha stepped into the boundless water realm, he felt the medium-sized world enveloping the Golden Cudgel outside tremble, as if it were about to explode. Just as he was preparing to reinforce it, he felt the Golden Cudgel suddenly stop. Naturally, the flowing light Myriad world's Buddha assumed that the Golden Cudgel had just unleashed its full power in an attempt to break free, but had failed. Thus, the flowing light Myriad world's Buddha unhesitatingly entered the lightning-filled sea where Sun WuKong was. When he saw the massive metal egg at the bottom of the deep sea, Liu Guang, the flowing light Myriad world's Buddha's shortened name, showed an as-expected expression. Indeed, it was true. No saint was so easily killed. Each would have 1 or 2 trump cards for self-preservation. Fortunately, he hadn't been careless. Otherwise, this monkey might have escaped one day if he wasn't careful. Seeing the lightning continuously strike the giant egg without causing any damage, Liu Guang knew that this sea of lightning could no longer harm Sun WuKong. So, his eyes focused, and a colossal pillar of seawater shot up, lifting the golden egg towards the surface. Liu Guang himself also trod on the water, ascending in an instant. After the water pillar broke the surface, it suddenly turned and flew towards a distant area. Liu Guang followed behind, propelling the seawater forward. A short while later, the water pillar flew over a stretch of verdant green seawater. Then, as if throwing something, he violently hurled the giant golden egg into the seawater below. Splash! A wave several zan high erupted. The next moment, the sound of corroding metal filled the air. The hissing and sizzling sounds were extremely jarring. It turned out that this stretch of seawater was the highly toxic water Liu Guang had mentioned, the spirit-severing water, capable of completely corroding even saints. Spirit-severing water, as its name implied, was a poisonous water that could sever the soul. Once this poisonous water entered the body, it would instantly destroy meridians, the physical body, the dantian, and even the sea of consciousness. Ultimately, it could even corrode the soul itself. This spirit-severing water originated from the primordial ancient world. Although it wasn't considered particularly precious there, in the Pangu realm, it had become an incredibly terrifying poisonous water. In just a few moments, the giant golden egg Sun WuKong had created was corroded and pitted. It was clear that before long Sun WuKong inside would be corroded by the poisonous water. At that point, he would likely have no hope of survival. Just then the giant golden egg seemed to begin to tremble. Then, its surface started to crack in pieces. Following that, with a thud, a giant ape, covered in golden fur interspersed with earthy yellow, appeared in the seawater. The spirit-severing water, capable of corroding even the metal eggshell, manifested from the spiritual energy of the five-colored divine stone of the metal attribute. Surprisingly, didn't seem to cause much harm to the suddenly appearing giant ape. This giant ape was indeed Sun WuKong. Moreover, it was Sun WuKong in his giant ape form, with the full power of his metal and earth attributes unleashed.